I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily. We're going to split this into two parts. A little later, we will be addressing Nigel Farage, the Coutts Bank, and the accusations that have led the boss of NatWest to announce that she'll be departing from her post. A lot more on that later. But we begin with some original journalism by one of our own here at Sky News. Police in Greater Manchester have, in essence, been accused of unnecessary and invasive strip searches of women without explanation behind the door of a cell. Sky News has been speaking to three women, one of whom says she was detained for 41 hours and has alleged that she was sexually assaulted whilst in custody. The journalist responsible for this story, Jason Farrell, Sky's home editor. Jason, great to have you on, and we should say at the outset that there will undoubtedly be material that you and I are discussing over the course of the next few minutes that some people will find distressing, particularly the point at which we start. Tell me what these three women have said happened to them whilst in police custody, and we should remember that at the heart of the story.
So three women, one police station, although obviously strip searches happen up and down the country. These happened over the course of 3 different years, actually. The first one in 2021 was a woman called Zaina. It was a welfare call. The police came into her house after someone had seen her on Zoom on cocaine and thought that she had overdosed. They came in to her house. She knocked the glasses off a police officer's face and was arrested. We get the body cam footage of her being arrested and taken into the van. It then cuts out. So we know that an officer got in the van because we see that from a different CCTV, but we don't see any footage from inside the van. And it's a 10-minute journey to the police station from where she's picked up. But actually, we don't see her again for about another hour and a half. Mm-hmm. So that's a question for her. She wants to know what happens in that time. We don't see her being checked into the police station. There should be a CCTV in the area where she's checked in. We don't see that. So the first time we pick her up again is when she's being taken into the police cell. And by this time, she's unconscious. She's clearly been unconscious for a while. She has no recollection of what happened in the van. She's carried in, her head's being held down as she's put onto some blue mattresses, and her hands are behind her back, handcuffed. She's clearly not a threat to anybody because she's out of it.
My jeans are taken down, my underwear is cut off, knickers and the bra, as well as my top. They then put oversized custody shorts with a belt on and leave me face down in the cell, still unconscious, with no top on and no blanket given.
There's a blanket left in the cell, but she's not covered up. So she's just left there, flopped, head down on the floor. And there is a question of duty of care here. Zaina feels she should have been taken to hospital, not to a police cell. She's unconscious due to potentially an overdose of drugs.
I wasn't a suicide risk at the time. I was unconscious, so I needed medical attention. But instead of providing an unconscious female medical attention, they thought, I know, let's take her clothes off instead and leave her there naked.
These days, you're in a police cell, there will be a camera on you at all times.
That's right. There is a camera on you at all times, and you can ask for it. You can ask for the custody logs as well, which she did. And the first thing we have to say is it took her a long time to get hold of them. She got hold of the logs first, and the logs do not match the video. So the strip search is not logged at all. And normally you'd have to give a justification for that. You'd have to explain why you were doing it. There's medical examinations that are logged that don't happen. There's an alleged assault on a police officer that doesn't happen. But most worrying of all is she thinks that she was sexually assaulted and raped in the police cell or in police custody, either in the police van on the way there. Her memory is very, very sketchy, but that's what she believes happened.
If her memory is sketchy, on what basis is she alleging a sexual assault?
She goes from a position of looking like she's sobering up, and then an hour of footage is missing, and then an hour later she's topless and she's behaving in a very sexual manner. So she believes she was drugged. Obviously another explanation is that the other drugs that she'd taken were kicking in. But her point is that when she went to the hospital, which she went to immediately afterwards, she complained of having pains in certain places, pointing to certain body parts. And she said that she thought she'd been sexually assaulted. And examinations show that some of her injuries were consistent with that. So she has simply asked for the footage to show what happened. And the fact that they've not provided it obviously leads to further suspicion on her behalf.
Why would you withhold footage? The very footage that could either prove or disprove my allegations you will not part with. Who's got something to hide? I'm openly saying that at some point during my detention with Greater Manchester Police, I was drugged and sexually assaulted Prove me wrong, give me the footage.
We'll return to that story in just a second, but again, we have three separate women on separate occasions alleging the same thing. Take us through the other two.
So, not rape or sexual assault, but certainly with regards to strip searches, they are saying that their strip searches were unjustified, and they question the motives behind the strip searches. So one is a woman who was accused of blackmail. She was accused of blackmail by someone who she had accused of sexually assaulting her sister. And she's taken in, she is strip searched, and she's completely naked. And she says there's no justification for it. She thinks that it is perhaps because she had complained about the way the police investigated her sister's case, and that they were heavy-handed with her because of that.
They said to me they was going to strip search me, so I was like, strip search me for what? Because they said I'm concealing. I said, I'm not concealing nothing. They told me if I didn't go in, they were basically going to tackle me to the floor and take my clothes off me anyway, so... Power. It was all power. Police on a power trip to shut me up. It's to make me scared. It's to show we're boss, not you.
The third example is perhaps the most shocking in many ways, because here is a woman who has gone to the police station to find her partner who is being held in custody for alleged domestic abuse against her. She needs the keys to get home. And she calls the police from outside the station and is eventually accused of malicious communications. In other words, put bluntly, swearing at the police over the phone. The police then demand a strip search, and she's not clear as to why they strip searched her, but we asked several times, what was the justification, and eventually told that she was potentially concealing a vape.
A vape?
So if your police are justified to strip search you if they believe that you are withholding something you shouldn't have, so obvious thing, a weapon. Mm-hmm. Second most obvious thing, drugs. Third most obvious thing, perhaps less obvious, but crucial evidence, maybe you could say. But also, this is a woman who's suffered potentially, allegedly, and she's, they should know this, is a domestic abuse. She's strip searched. And I'm going to be graphic here, because I think we have to be. She's covering herself, and she's asked to spread her legs. And she's asked to completely open up, and then the reverse side.
Once I'd taken everything off, I was like holding my stomach a little bit, trying to keep my dignity. And then she said, no, you need to sit down and open your legs. And then I was a bit like apprehensive to open my legs. And then she was like, no, you need to open them fully so I can see in there.
Were these police officers who were strip searching you aware that you were an alleged victim of a domestic abuse assault only the night before?
Yeah, they were aware.
They're looking for a vape. And you have to ask about the proportionality of this. I mean, she doesn't, and with each part of a police strip search, you have to say, is this part of the strip search necessary? Uh-huh. You can't just say, okay, we're going to strip search her. You've got to reach a point, and perhaps that point is, if you're looking for a vape, perhaps that point is after you strip someone down to their underwear. Mm-hmm. Do you really need to go that much further? So these are the questions around accountability and the way in which these things are conducted, which I think are raised quite graphically and horrifically in all of these cases.
Let's just return to Zaina for a second. I mean, she only discovered the detail of what happened to her when, through that subject access request, she got access to the CCTV and the police logs and was able to essentially drop a chronology of the time that she spent in police custody and noticed that there were gaps therein.
There's a very messy chronology from the custody logs, which incidentally say a number of times she's not fit to be detained. And yet, there she stays. So for a while, that's all she's got. So it's when she gets the video footage, which is provided all jumbled up and once put together, shows that there are these two missing hours. One is quite concerning because she goes from being fully clothed and acting relatively normally to not acting normally at all and naked. And she spends a lot of the time in the cell naked. And that's one of the reasons why I got my producer, Liz Lane, to go through all the footage and look at it, because it needed looking at in details to what exactly happened. At one point, she's bleeding, and that's not logged either. So there's all these things that she didn't know about because she was having a psychotic episode in this cell, and she is vulnerable.
Tell me what Greater Manchester Police are saying about these 3 individual cases, one has to assume there is some form of an investigation going on.
Greater Manchester Police, they say they're committed to delivering an outstanding service. They say GMP's aware that these 3 individuals are unhappy with the service they received when they were arrested and detained. Their complaints have or are being investigated by the force. Though one investigation is ongoing, there's currently no evidence to suggest any GMP employees have misconducted themselves or committed a criminal offence. Under the definition within the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, 2 of these individuals were not strip searched. Due to concerns for their welfare, their clothing was removed and replaced with anti-rip garments. And this process is subject to different legislation and guidance. And as of speaking, I haven't seen what that different legislation and guidance is to what they would be guided to under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act.
Okay, so let's be absolutely clear about this. The police, despite request, have not been able to furnish you with the legislation and the guidelines that they say that they are working to.
They said they were going to go back to their lawyers and provide it a few days ago, and they haven't yet.
We await that with interest. Secondly, as I understand it, the Mayor of Manchester's office has intimated that Greater Manchester Police is in possession of all of the appropriate CCTV that we've been referring to here. And in Zaina's case, that suggests that Greater Manchester Police, so far, without explanation, have not been willing to hand over parts of that footage.
We've put all of this to the Mayor's office, and we have, I've asked for an interview. They did offer a few weeks ago a statement. I said I wanted an interview. And I've asked them again today. They say they are going to speak to us in the coming days. I can also say that Andy Burnham met with one of the women, Kirsty, yesterday, and had a proper conversation with her about this. But with Zaina's case, yes, what they are told is that the footage exists. That's what Zaina's been told from the Mayor's office.
Just for the sake of absolute clarity here, you presumably have asked Greater Manchester Police why this footage has not been made available.
I've just been given this statement, which I just read to you.
So there has been no direct answer to where is this. They've not said it was accidentally deleted.
We've directly asked.
They've not said that it's been lost, accidentally. They've not said there's some national security reason.
No, they've not answered the question. The statement that I've read you is what they've responded with.
You've also been speaking to those who formerly worked with GMP. Chief Superintendent Martin Harding, he is very critical of the way in which this has been handled.
Yeah, so Martin Harding, he was a custody officer as well. He says the worst custody records he's ever seen. He says that when I said, are you suspicious? He said, I think she was raped.
I've seen no justification at all. I expected to see on the custody record the custody sergeant give the authority and explain the grounds for the requirement for a strip search. I've seen none of that on the custody record. I believe she was raped. I believe she was raped by an officer, and I believe the organisation is covering up.
And that's his conclusion.
These 3 women, Zaina, Kirsty and Maria, Kirsty and Maria as we're calling them, exceptionally brave to be able to articulate what they think may have happened to them. But I suppose, once again, and you've alluded to this already, policing in the United Kingdom at the moment is in pretty low dudgeon, and it's held in not the greatest respect, but, predominantly because of what has been happening, closer to us here in London than in Manchester. But one would have assumed that on occasions like this, police forces, chief constables, would be desperate to ensure that their officers working on the front line with women are working well, are doing what they should do. And that there is absolutely no accusation that is made about their police force that is not investigated promptly and fully.
Absolutely. You would hope, wouldn't you? And the Casey review was scathing, damning about the way in which the Met Police had, not done enough to tackle misogyny, had not done enough to look at the way crimes against women were investigated. This is not just an issue that affects the Met. The police are here to protect us, and the vast majority of them are doing their job and and doing it well. And it's just that there is a problem at the moment, that there have been people like David Carrick and Wayne Couzens who've brought a cloud onto the police. But sadly, as well, there has been ample evidence of a kind of undercurrent of misogyny as well within the police force. So it's absolutely crucial that the top brass within the police come out and make sure that when something like this comes along, it's dealt with quickly and efficiently. And it doesn't seem to have happened here.
It doesn't. Well, Jason, we wait to hear what we will hear, and I'm sure we will be hearing more from Greater Manchester Police. For now, though, thanks very much. Well, let's move on to the second story of the podcast. Nigel Farage and the ongoing saga involving bank accounts, or the lack thereof, at Coutts Bank. Well, the story took another dramatic twist today when Dame Alison Rose, the boss of NatWest, which owns Coutts Bank, she resigned from her position. Let's delve into this with our business correspondent, Paul Kelso. Paul, good to talk to you again. Just bring us right up to date with where we are with the story, because it basically started about a month ago, didn't it, when Nigel Farage got on Twitter and complained that he was being turned into a non-person, that the establishment was trying to force him out of the UK by closing his bank accounts.
Yes, he claimed he was being debanked, another charming phrase we can add to the journalese lexicon. And he said it was because of his political views. He didn't at that stage say who he was being debanked by, but it was quickly reported that he had an account with Coutts, the bank of monarchs and magnates, 300 years old, owned these days by NatWest, and he claimed it was on political grounds. They didn't like his politics, so they were going to close down his accounts. There followed a few weeks of pretty fevered speculation, some briefing around why it might be. Coutts, when we and others contacted them, pointed us towards their eligibility criteria, which said you had to have more than 7 figures either invested in the bank or borrowed from the bank to qualify. The key moment in this was the BBC then reported what felt like a really juicy little exclusive scoop, that it was not politics, but it was in fact those eligibility criteria that was the reason Farage was being told he couldn't have an account. He didn't have enough money. That was the BBC's business editor, Simon Jack, extremely experienced, extremely high-profile journalist. Within a few days, Nigel Farage showed that story to be not entirely true. He published a dossier compiled by Coutts, got it through what's called a subject access request. Send me everything you know about me. Anyone can do it to their bank. And it was a remarkable document, really, that went through his entire career and pointed out that some people think he's a racist, a xenophobe. It called him a disingenuous grifter. And all of this, they said, was essentially they were concerned that Farage would damage Coutts' reputation, so they wanted to ease him out of the bank. Boy, has that exploded in the other direction. It's been disastrous for NatWest. It was revealed Alison Rose sat next to Simon Jack, the journalist in question, at a BBC charity event. Was she the source? Well, on Tuesday evening, she said, I was the source of this story. It was inaccurate. I didn't have the full picture. She apologised to Mr. Farage. The board said they still had confidence in her. It felt pretty thin, that position, and pretty hard to maintain. Sure enough, 8 hours later, she was resigning after the Prime Minister and Chancellor made clear they didn't have faith in her. Why does that matter? Well, the taxpayer owns 38% of NatWest. They're major investors, as well as having a big political stake in the culture wars that this bank has been dragged into. And Rose went in the early hours, Britain's highest profile businesswoman, out of a job.
I mean, even if she had provided Simon Jack with accurate information, should the chief executive, should the boss of a bank be talking about the individual relationship that they have with any of their clients?
It is hard to think of something more damaging than the boss of a bank discussing confidential financial information of an individual, never mind a high-profile individual, with a journalist. It's simply not done. It's the foundation stone of banking. On that, everyone's right. I know this. When we try and make inquiries, when we made initial inquiries about this story, that's what we were told. I have the odd contact I know within NatWest. You couldn't get blood from a stone on this. They stuck to it. Alison Rose maintains that when she spoke to Simon Jack, lots of this was in the public domain already. She stuck to what was out there. She didn't disclose any personal private financial details, and she spoke only in general terms. But given the story was inaccurate, given Mr. Farage's doggedness with this, that position was really hard to maintain. She still, I think, would say she didn't breach his confidentiality, but it's a dreadful look for the boss of a bank, much more so one that's publicly owned in part.
Yeah, I mean, I must be one of the few people on the planet who's actually sat down and read all 40 pages of that internal Coutts document. And it does make it clear that there are concerns about Nigel Farage's politics, but there are also financial reasons. And this may well be why, Dame Alison stuck to her guns so long, but there are financial reasons why they were bringing that relationship to an end. But just in terms of the regulations, I mean, can a bank cancel someone's account on the basis of their political opinions?
That is pretty clear. The government says they cannot and should not. It is a grey area. Plainly, the banks will all say they don't do it. Really interestingly, Nigel Farage has received at least 2 apologies from NatWest so far. He's got more apologies from them than he has bank accounts, as by my count. But neither of them has been for the decision to take away his or ease him out, get him a glide path, as they put it, to exit from Coutts. They've apologised for the process and the dossier. Alison Rose apologised for talking to journalists about it, but they haven't apologised for that decision, and that's because they still maintain it was a commercial decision, but they would say it's commercial but informed not simply by pounds and pence, but by the potential damage to the bank's reputation, its values and purpose, as they put it. NatWest, deliberately under Alison Rose, has adopted a social purpose, part of the reaction to being the bank that was bailed out with the most taxpayer money after the financial crash. So they would still say it was a commercial decision, although informed by the rather nebulous values. And that, of course, has come crashing head-on into Nigel Farage's disquiet and upset with woke values permeating business as banking, as he would put it. And that might be a bit of a bubble issue. I'm not sure how much this plays out there with ordinary NatWest customers, but certainly inside the political world it has lit a fire, and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer have happily fallen in. On principle, I think they agree, and many others would. Politics shouldn't decide whether you can have a bank account.
So where does this go from here, Paul? I mean, I see that Nigel Farage is calling for the heads of every single member of the NatWest board. I don't see that one happening. But as you've intimated, senior politicians from the Prime Minister down have rushed to Nigel Farage's defence. I mean, could it be that we will see the regulations changed?
The Treasury Secretary has held a meeting on Wednesday with 19 bank and building society bosses. He has, that was initially called as a bit of a banging heads together on this issue, emphasising freedom of expression of customers was paramount. They should never be punished for their political beliefs. There's going to be a tweak to regulations. Customers will have the right to demand to know more about why an account is being closed, and they'll have a longer period, 90 days grace, so that they can pursue any complaint with the Ombudsman, etc. So all the banks are saying they will absolutely adhere by this. I think it sent a bit of a chill down the spine of the industry, the way this has escalated. But it does raise really interesting points about how capitalism is informed by values of its customers. I say NatWest has adopted a greater social purpose under Alison Rose's leadership. Well, delivered its biggest profits since the crash. You could draw from that customers like it, and they want to see banks lending more responsibly, thinking about the implications, for example, of funding more North Sea oil exploration versus funding wind farms. It's the kind of stuff that all companies are thinking about. The banking sector has been thinking about especially. But it's extremely interesting times, and it is fascinating, although very uneasy for the people in the middle of it, to watch the great agents of capitalism, the banking sector, being dragged into the culture war and being accused of being the liberal woke problem.
My thanks to Paul Kelso and Jason Farrell. That's your lot from The Daily with me, Niall Paterson. We'll see you next time.